James, let me start the discussion with you. You just come out with a report which talks about how the global trade scenario is going to pan out by 2013. So give me the big headlines that have come out of your report.
I think there are three key headlines that come out of this. The first is, as you rightly point out, a very rapid development of the South-South trade corridor. But that can be characterized by the move up the value chain of a number of countries, particularly in the emerging or faster growing markets, whether that's India, whether that's China, or a number of other markets around the world. The second thing to come out of this report is that for developed markets, they're having to understand what their competitive advantage is and continue to innovate and diversify. And the third is the importance of hubs, global hubs, whether it's Singapore, Hong Kong, Dubai, or otherwise, where a lot of business is being done through connections being made. These themes are all coming out and are really supported by those macroeconomic themes of the very significant growth of middle class, particularly in the emerging markets.
So Anis, how do you see India making its presence felt in this changing economic scenario where opportunities are tremendous, but India also needs to move up significantly? It needs to up its game in terms of remaining competitive.
The fact is trade equations are changing around the world, and this is not happening over the 30-year period. This is perhaps something we're seeing in the last 5 to 10 years. Now, when we look at trade equations changing, from an Indian perspective, again, we have to focus on what is it that is really changing. And interestingly, ASEAN countries, again, something James mentioned, the kind of focus India has had on these countries, particularly look east, look towards Asia, has really gone up. The Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, for example, with Japan, and that is already in place, and with Korea as well. India's negotiating a tough environment, let me put it that way, particularly on the Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement with Thailand and Malaysia. Services is really something which is an Indian engine of growth at this point of time, and India really needs to break into these countries from a services perspective, because right now that is not happening.
Right.
And we've seen our Prime Minister visit Thailand, a lot of FTA negotiations happening around that area, and clearly focused on saying, look, in India, if services is really what our main strength is, let's get that out there. Let's get it to people who will really recognize that, and that will help Indian growth.
Right, okay. So, with global trade, with world trade, as Indian companies move out to new markets, also comes the whole issue of risks, right? There's a currency risk, there's a regulatory risk, and there's also a larger political risk, like we've seen in the case of some Indian companies, like in Bolivia, for example. So, Gopal, let me start with you. How well are Indian companies placed today to manage these risks?
I think there is a bit of a challenge, at least this is my perspective, in terms of handling volatility and risk management. And I think there is a lot of, I would say, partnerships and collaborations required by the Indian companies with banks or financial institutions or specialist organization to manage the risk.
Right.
And I think that's a significant part of strategy which needs to be ramped up.
Right. Susanto, from your perspective?
So there's no doubt the cost of compliance is going to go up. Absolutely. There's no shortcuts in this operation. You got to, these markets individually, they are different. You got to understand those markets, you got to understand the policies, you got to understand the bureaucracy, that how it works, if you have to establish, because business is all about timing to market, correct?
Exactly.
So if there's a delay for more than a reasonable time frame that you get out of the market, you don't get to see the market at all. So that is very important, right? And it's pharma is always, it's equally applicable to pharma as well.
Absolutely, right.